Okay, welcome everyone. I think we'll begin now. I will be logging on some guests as we go along. This webinar is originating from the City of Vancouver, which is founded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Some of our speakers may also be presenting from other locations, and we respectfully acknowledge and respect those traditional territories. Hello, my name is Sophie King. I'm the Manager of Professional Learning at PIBC, and welcome to our webinar on ethics and professionalism for planning. This is an annual webinar that we do every year. This year, our speakers are, and we welcome them, Alex Taylor, Manager of Parks, Planning, Research and Design at the City of Surrey. Alex is also the chair of the PIBC Professional Conduct Review Committee. As well, he has been on our board of directors for several years. Welcome, Alex. We also have today presenting James Stiver, Director of Planning and Building and Development at the City of Maple Ridge. And also, James also sits on the Professional Conduct Review Committee. And finally, we have today Jacqueline East, who is the Executive Director of the Mount Douglas Seniors Housing. And she as well is a member of the Professional Conduct Review Committee. So we have three very knowledgeable people presenting today on ethics, professionalism, and planning. Welcome to all three. I wanted to let everybody know that we are recording the webinar, and we will be providing a link on our website to both the recording and the slide presentation. And you are welcome to go on there and review the webinar or download it. If you have any questions during any of the presentations, please type them in the chat window. And if there's time at the end, the questions will be addressed. However, the panel will begin with addressing the questions that were pre-submitted at the time of registration. So that's the priority first. And now I would like to welcome our first speaker, Alex Taylor. Hi, Alex.
Thanks, Sophie. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, you sound fine to me.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Yeah, so great to see so many people really interested in ethics again this year. As Sophie mentioned, this is an annual thing, and myself and a few members of our Professional Conduct Review Committee are very excited to dig into ethics and provide an overview, but dig into some of the details and go over some case studies as well. I'm actually subbing in for one of our other committee members today, and unfortunately I need to leave at 12:45, but I'm happy to talk about the intro section here. So I'll unfortunately miss some of the Q&A, but I'm sure I'll chat with many of you who are online down the road. I would like to begin with PIBC's statement of recognition, acknowledgement, and appreciation that we are able to work, live, and learn on the traditional lands of BC and Yukon First Nations and Indigenous people. Acknowledging the principles of truth and reconciliation, we recognize and respect the history, the languages, the cultures of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all the Indigenous people of Canada whose presence continues to enrich our lives and this country. Today we'll be covering a wide range of topics in ethics and professionalism, followed by an interactive Q&A session. We'll first cover why ethics is important for practicing planners and how it makes the planning profession different than some other professions. We'll introduce the National Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct and talk about what it says about our professional conduct, including core concepts and values in ethics. We'll cover the various responsibilities of planners and some ethical issues faced by planners, including some case studies using real-life scenarios. We'll touch on the process of filing an ethical complaint to PIBC and overview the history of ethical complaints to PIBC in recent years. and then we'll open the floor for the Q&A session. So why ethics? Why does the profession have a code of ethics? Well, planners come from varied backgrounds, but we all have the same ethical requirements as registered professional planners. The things that make us professionals are that we all have a specific education, have completed an exam process for registration, have logged work experience, have completed continuous learning, and we have a code of ethics. As professional planners, our reputation is very important, and so it's critical to act ethically and with integrity. And to do that, it's very important to have very good grounding in ethics and professional conduct. So kudos for all of you folks for being here today and wanting to learn more. Ethical standards and accountability are key elements that distinguish professionals from non-professionals. There's many fields that do not have codes of ethics or ethical standards and accountability. Planners are recognized for ensuring the public interest is protected, and we work towards complete communities that are equitable and sustainable. And lastly, ethics help planners earn the confidence and respect of the communities that we serve. Philosophically, there are 6 key benefits of ethics to the profession. First, ethics provide a moral foundation to the field of planning that guides the decision-making process. It seeks to answer fundamental questions about what is morally right or wrong, what is just or unjust, and good or bad. It helps planners consider the ethical implications of our actions, ensuring that our initiatives align with the principles of fairness, justice, and social well-being. Second, planning involves making choices that affect individuals, communities, and the environment as well. Ethics encourages engagement in reflective self-examination and evaluation of one's own beliefs, values, and actions. And ethical considerations help planners identify and prioritize those values that should guide our decisions. Third, conflicts are quite common in every profession, and planning generally involves balancing conflicting goals and interests in most of the work that we do. With ethical reasoning, planners navigate these complexities by providing a systematic approach to weighing different values, interests, and perspectives. Fourth, ethics provides a framework for making ethical decisions based on rational and moral considerations. So it encourages a systematic approach that takes into account ethical principles, consequences, rights, and the perspectives of others as well. Ethical decision-making aims to align our actions with our values and contribute to the betterment of the community. Fifth, ethics guide planners to recognize and address social inequities, such as spatial segregation, discrimination, and inequitable access to resources, as some of us have seen in our communities, and promoting social justice by creating more inclusive and equitable communities. And last but not least, planning decisions have far-reaching consequences for society, both in the short and long term, and ethical principles provide a basis for ensuring public accountability through transparency, inclusiveness, and responsiveness to the needs and aspirations of the community. As most of you are aware, PIBC is a provincial and territorial institute or association, lovingly, although somewhat awkwardly known by the acronym PTIA, or PTIA, for those of you out there who prefer that. CIP, the Canadian Institute of Planners, administers a national code of ethics and professional conduct to provide consistency across Canada and to all the PTIAs. This national code consists of 2 things. The first is a code of ethics, which is an aspirational set of values, and the second is a code of professional conduct, which has 35 statements. The code of ethics portion strives to ensure that planners will use their skill set and knowledge for the betterment of society. The code of professional conduct acts like a source of inspiration and guidance for professional planners. This national code forms the basis of planning practice by members. And the national code, if folks want to Google it right now, it's on the CIP website. It's about 4 or 5 pages long. I don't know about you, I sleep with it under my pillow just to remind me. Many PTIAs have established their own code based on the national code to ensure transferability, and many include other elements. PIBC has done so, but our code is not significantly different from the national code. And the PIBC Code of Conduct and Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct is also on the PIBC website, and it's about 4 pages long as part of the bylaws. The two concepts included in the Code of Ethics are competency and integrity. First, competency in our code means for members to have the skills, knowledge, and abilities needed for their area of practice and to be able to apply these successfully. The second, integrity, means having a keen sense of responsibility to the planning profession, employees, and the public, and retain sense of independence to exercise professional judgment independently without bias. The National Code includes a one-page statement of values, which has 8 values that have also been incorporated into the PIBC code and other provincial and territorial institute or association codes across the country. They're written in detail in the actual code document, but the 8 are to respect and integrate the needs of future generations, to overcome or compensate for jurisdictional limitations, understanding that our work has a potential impact on many jurisdictions and interests. The values include to value the natural and the cultural environment. We assume roles as stewards of these environments, balancing preservation with sustainable development. Fourth is to recognize and react positively to uncertainty. So the long-term future is certainly unpredictable, and being adaptable and flexible and providing responses to deal positively with this uncertainty must be a portion of our value framework. We respect diversity and protect diversity in values, cultures, economics, ecosystems, built environments, and distinct places as well. One of our values is to balance the needs of communities and individuals. We also value fostering public participation, ensuring that the needs of those whose interests have not been represented is incorporated in our work. And lastly, our last value here is to articulate and communicate values. So planners believe in applying these values explicitly to their work and communicating their importance to clients, employers, colleagues, and the public as well. The portion of the code that relates to professional conduct includes 3 sections on planners' responsibility. It includes responsibility to the public interest, responsibilities to clients or employers, and lastly, responsibilities to the profession as a whole. To the public interest, it states that planners must respect diversity needs, values, and aspirations of the public. We must provide clear and accurate information on planning matters to the members of the public in a timely manner, while recognizing employers' right to confidentiality. We must acknowledge the interrelated nature of planning decisions. And lastly, we must provide opportunities for meaningful participation and education in the planning process to all the interested parties. And you can see how the code's values come through in these responsibilities. Secondly, the planner's responsibilities to clients and employers. Among other things, we must provide independent professional opinion. We must undertake planning services with diligence and render services with appropriate preparation. We must acknowledge the values held by clients or employers in the work performed, unless such values conflict with other aspects of the code. And we must respect the client or employer right to confidentiality of information gathered through a professional relationship. However, only unless such rights conflict with the other aspects of the code. We must inform clients or employers in the event of conflicts between values or actions of the client or employer and those of this code in a timely manner. And we also must ensure timely and full disclosure of possible conflicts that arise from a member's private or professional activities. The code states we must not offer or accept any financial or other inducements, including prospective employment, that could or appear to influence or affect professional opportunities for planning advice. Employees of public agencies are bound to not give professional planning advice for compensation to a private client or employer within the same jurisdiction without disclosure to the agency and also written consent. And then conversely, consultants to public agencies must not give professional planning advice for compensation also within the same jurisdiction without disclosure to the agency and written consent. And these are very applicable in situations where there's possibility of a conflict of interest arising. And lastly, planners' responsibility to the profession. Planners are responsible for a variety of things, including keeping knowledge up to date about various planning theories, philosophy, and practice and current events. We must not engage in questionable conduct in any aspect of professional or personal life. And as humans, we do make mistakes, but that being a member of the profession means owning any mistakes, making apologies, and dealing with any injured parties as part of the code. Planners must not advertise services that are outside our areas of competency. We must not falsely injure the professional reputation of another member or their work, and try not to steal anybody's job or contract. Planners must not sign off on work completed by others that has not been checked by themselves personally. We must deal with ethics responsibly, including the duty to report any unethical misconduct by any other member of the profession. The duty report is there. And planners must not speak for the Institute in public unless authorized to do so. And lastly, planners must comply with any request from the Institute for information about ethical or professional conduct issues. And one must respect the process and the decision for any disciplinary process from the Institute. And I'll pass the mic over to James, who's going to carry on with the next section of the presentation here.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex. And good afternoon to everybody. It's great to see so many people participating today. Seem to be having a bit of a camera issue here.
James, double click on your camera.
Yeah, it says it's giving me a bit of an access error message here.
Oh, well, we can hear you at least.
Okay, well, that's the important part. So, Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just move forward. In today's planning world of the professional planning, we are faced with a multitude of challenges coming at us, and it's changing every day. Certain real-world challenges that planners face commonly day to day can include plagiarism, equity and transparency issues, and accountability. Now let's explore these things a little bit deeper. So plagiarism is defined as using another person's ideas, results, process, or words and passing off as your own without crediting the original source. It's a serious breach of professional misconduct in the planning profession. People plagiarize as a result of possibly not being aware or knowing any better of what they're doing, pressure to do so, a lack of personal confidence, work perceived as being too difficult, a lack of interest, or even laziness in some cases. How do we avoid plagiarism as a professional? Ideally, we should be quoting the source of the information that we derive the information from, giving credit to that source. Citing the source creates a trail that others can follow and build on in future work. Paraphrasing is an important way to share ideas that you're maybe building on from others. You can cite the source, but you don't necessarily have to quote it in that case. And using common knowledge. That is in cases where it's not attributable to one person in particular or one source. It can be information about famous people and their work, current events. The result of planning processes becomes public and available. That can be shared as well. So now a simple case study to consider on the issue of plagiarism. In this case, planning consultant A is hired to update a community's OCP. After community engagement, they determine many of the original policies are still applicable and appropriate and remain in the new draft version of the OCP. Council gives first reading to the new OCP, and a week later, planning consultant A receives a call from the original planning consultant, consultant B, accusing the current planning consultant of plagiarism because of the work that was copied. What's the best next step for the planning consultant that's currently working on the project? Does he or she apologize and agree to give credit to the original planning consultant? Do nothing. Once adopted, the OCP belongs to that municipality. Tell the consultant that the work is yours now and they should back off. Request council to establish ownership of the document by resolution. So in this case, the best approach is to do nothing. Once adopted, a community's OCP belongs to the municipality, and that consultant has been contracted to carry that work forward. Following this example, a consultant prepares documents, often for a municipality or planning staff does. Once it's accepted and adopted and it's publicly accessible, the documents become the property of that municipality, not the consultant that prepared the original work. Most RFPs that municipalities issue state that the product becomes the property of the municipality once it's delivered. If it doesn't, it should. Therefore, if the municipality hires a different consultant in the future to update or revise the adopted document and gives the new consultant permission to carry that information forward, change or modify that information, it's their right to give that permission to copy those materials and use them as they see fit. In fact, generally, most municipalities do not maintain a consultant's name on adopted documents. For this reason, it's seen as property of the municipality that can be altered and shared as needed. So the new consultant, or consultant A in this case, would not be plagiarizing the original consultant's work if they keep some of the original wording. Equity has been in question for many years, but it is becoming more regularly part of the planning profession and our conversations as professionals. Communities have been dealing for decades with issues like gaps between wealthy and poor neighborhoods, for example, and the impacts of colonial-based assumptions and practices on Indigenous communities. Health, income, mobility, and other inequities tend to be institutionalized and reflected in historical policies and practices, and in some cases have been shown to disproportionately limit opportunities to groups based on their race, age, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, religion, or disability, among others. Often people of color or members of equity-seeking groups can't see themselves reflected and feel detached from and challenged to engage in community planning efforts. Fundamentally, the planning profession is driven to create better communities for all. Planners must collaborate daily with many professionals from other sectors to deliver on these inclusive, resilient, and sustainable community objectives. While a great deal of effort in the planning profession focuses on identifying and addressing inequality in our communities, there is limited research on those inequalities within the field of planning itself. The planning profession in Canada is still limited in terms of racial and cultural diversity, which can make it challenging to appreciate and incorporate the lived experiences of racialized communities in city building. This can also result in unintended consequences of our work. Planners need to be sensitive to this and seek out opportunities to build more diverse connections within members of the community and within our profession. For example, this need can be seen in grassroots organizations such as food banks, places of worship, First Nation communities, or other nonprofit groups partnering to complete affordable housing projects, for example, to meet a community's need. Now, a simple case study to consider the issue of equity. A municipal planner is conducting engagement for an OCP review. One of the primary drivers of the OCP is to increase residential infill, which is a very common issue these days. During the engagement process, there is strong opposition from the residents of one particular neighborhood. What is the planner's best approach in a case like this? A, prepare the staff report noting the opposition group's comments. B, prepare the staff report that provides a summary of all engagement. C, prepare the staff report not including the comments of the interest group. Or D, prepare the staff report and write recommendations that reflect the interest group. The best answer in this case is to prepare the staff report that provides a summary of all engagement. It may seem obvious, but all engagement must be heard and recorded. However, it's the professional planner's job to filter the engagement, ensuring that the voices are heard as best as we can. And it's also important to make recommendations using best practices, following the direction from the decision makers, whether it's council or a board or others, while serving the public interest, not one single public interest. Another example to consider on the issue of equity and the public interest, a municipal planner is conducting engagement for an OCP review. The engagement was advertised in the local newspaper and on social media. One neighborhood has a very high percentage of recent immigrants, and there was a very low attendance from this community or involvement in the process. What's the best action for the planner in this case? A, assume that neighborhood or community of people was not interested in the process. B, create policies that might reflect their views. C, conduct more engagement using translators and translation. Or D, request a spokesperson from the community to attend a meeting to engage personally. In this case, the best approach would be to conduct more engagement using translation and translators. The importance in inclusionary engagement is to be fair to all residents of an affected community. The original engagement program did not provide a fair or equal opportunity for the residents of this neighborhood to participate by not providing any of the materials in the language most used by those residents which could have resulted in a barrier to their participation. Recent census results have demonstrated that languages other than English and French are increasingly being spoken as primary household languages in the communities in which we work. And we as a profession must recognize the changing needs of our community by providing those translation, translator, and culturally appropriate means of engaging all residents whenever we can and as budgets permit. The best solution here would be to hold another round of engagement using translated materials that better reflect the community's makeup and provide translators at any public virtual engagement sessions. Recognizing this can often be costly and beyond the scope of work, it is a sensitive issue that we must navigate, but knowing where those pockets of culture and language are in your community will help us be better at communicating and sharing our programs and projects with people and engaging in a meaningful way. So with that, I will hand it over to Jacqueline.
Thanks, James, and thanks. And I'm going to jump into a discussion about transparency and accountability now. Planners, we're often on the front lines of, and sometimes very controversial, community development debates. And so being transparent in our communications, especially around public engagement, is essential to maintaining trust among all those who we are responsible to, including that could be our employers, our clients, our applicants, public officials, and the general public. So planners must always act in the public interest. And that's a concept that takes a lot of thought to wrap one's mind around. And our code provides principles that help you get there by establishing ethical guidelines aimed at ensuring that public confidence in the integrity of the planning process itself. So one example that we thought we could share is the use of social media and for communication. It's a great way to disseminate information. And certainly there is a large portion of our populations and certain demographics that rely on social media. It's information in real time. It engages community members who might not attend meetings or participate in government in person, but it also has to be used responsibly. You need it with a keen awareness of those in the community who do not have access to information through social media, and also a keen awareness of the harm that can be done with some of the way people engage in social media. Another non-technical example might be one I just experienced, where a critical community survey about infrastructure in the community was disseminated through property tax notices or municipal utility bills. It's a method that may further privilege property owners over renters in that particular community. So another case study 4 now, it actually relates to this professional. And here's the scenario. You're out for dinner and you overhear someone who you recognize as a registered professional planner saying very derogatory things about another registered professional planner. What do you do? Do you ignore it and chalk it up to happy hour? Do you lean over and tell the planner to stop? Or do you go to the next table, ask to speak with the planner privately, or do you report the incident the next morning to PIBC? In this case, the right answer is to go to the next table and ask to speak to the planner privately. And the question, if you ask why would that be the right answer? Well, in the code, we are all bound to treat each other with respect, which means not slandering other planners. We also have a responsibility to report any other members we see breaking the code to PIBC. In this case, it would be good practice to speak to that member privately, note that you felt they were breaking the code, and provide them an opportunity to acknowledge it, apologize, and make it right. If the alleged offender is abusive or refuses to apologize or recognize that they were speaking inappropriately, that is when you contact PIBC, who will refer you the matter to the Professional Conduct Review Committee, which we're calling acronym here PCRC. I'll keep going here. The next slide is case study number 5. Our 5th case study turns to 2 planners. One who's a planning consultant submitting an application for a purpose-built rental. The application conforms with the OCP and the housing policies. Through the engagement, it seems that the community generally supports it. The other planner is the file manager, who lives close to the project and does not support it. The file manager decides to ask for additional reports, push the application off agendas, and take an extremely long time to review materials. Your efforts to communicate directly with the file manager fail to provide any rationale for the delayed process. So if you were the planning consultant acting on behalf of the applicant, what would you do? The options we've got here for you to think about: would you politely provide the additional requested reports and request a council date? Would you schedule a meeting with the local councillors to complain about the process? Would you seek a meeting with the director of planning to review the process? Or would you place a complaint of obstruction and unprofessionalism to PIBC? I'm letting you think about that. And the answer is that in this case, you should seek a meeting with the director of planning to review the process. Based on the facts so far, you can't be 100% sure that the delays are intentional, and the file manager is completely within their right to request information they feel is required to fully understand the impacts of the proposed development. Bringing it up with the director, however, provides an opportunity to discuss it with someone other than the file manager. And if it appears the municipal planner is placing unnecessary roadblocks in the way due to personal preferences, the director has an opportunity to intervene in the process. In this case, if the director takes no action and it then becomes clear the planner is obstructing the process, the consultants or /developer applicant can then make a complaint to PIBC's Professional Conduct Review Committee. In case number 6, which brings us to the final case for today, we're actually going to look at artificial intelligence. It's becoming really a popular tool in many common personal and professional activities, and a planner uses AI. And in this case scenario, I should say, a planner uses AI to write a report to council. When a member of council makes note of a factual error in the report, the planner apologizes and explains that the error came from AI-generated content. If you were the planner, what should you have done to avoid the situation? Number 1, double-checked everything that was written and assumed sole responsibility for it. Number 2, not used AI in preparing the report. 3, added a disclaimer to the report clearly stating that AI had been used and may contain errors. Or D, nothing. Errors are inevitable from time to time, and AI, like humans, isn't perfect. In fact, the planner should have double-checked everything that was written and assumed sole responsibility for the work. Excuse me. AI is a very useful tool and productive tool, and it doesn't need to be avoided. AI is only a tool, though, and therefore the author bears full responsibility for the accuracy and applicability of the material used from an AI source. Applying a disclaimer to work about the use of AI would shift the blame for errors away from the planner, and is inappropriate. It undermines the professional credibility of the work. It's our professional obligation to do what's necessary to deliver accurate work to the best of our ability. Moving to who can file or how to file a complaint with the Professional Conduct Review Committee. Anyone can file a complaint against a PIBC member for allegedly breaking the code. That could be fellow members, members of the public, developers, or even elected officials. Formal complaints that are received by PIBC are forwarded to the Professional Conduct Review Committee, which is comprised of 14 volunteer PIBC members who have a variety of experiences and backgrounds. The chair appoints 2 case officers to conduct an initial investigation of the complaint. The subject member is informed about the complaint and is requested to respond. And after a thorough review of the complaint, the evidence provided, the formal response by the subject member, and the relevant aspects of the code, the case officers make a recommendation in a formal report to the Professional Conduct Review Committee chair. The chair then reviews it and either negotiates the content or signs off on it. Some investigations find that there is no breach of the code, in which no further action is required. However, some find that there was indeed a breach of the code, in which case the next step is to propose a consent discipline process. And if that fails, or in cases of serious breaches of the code, a review hearing is held. The timelines for this process depend on the complexity of the complaint, the number of parties involved, and the time required to gather information and communicate back and forth with the complainant and subject member, usually in formal letters and emails. Some investigations can take several months and dozens of hours of time from case officers. This is a quick snapshot of the Professional Conduct Review Committee over the past decade, just so you get a sense of what's been happening. Each year, PIBC fields dozens of inquiries related to professional conduct and ethics, and some of them turn into formal complaints. In the last 10 years, PIBC received 24 formal complaints of alleged professional misconduct against PIBC members. In addition to the formal complaints, PIBC received general inquiries regarding professional misconduct that may not have resulted in a formal complaint. 23 of the 24 cases concerned subject members who were PIBC members, and 1 complaint was made against a former member. 15 of these were lodged by members of the public, 9 were lodged by another PIBC member, 19 of the subject members worked in the public sector, and 5 worked in the private sector. Beyond investigating formal complaints, PIBC members do a variety of other things, including developing and delivering professional learning for members on ethics and professional conduct topics through webinars like today, sessions, and articles, assisting with general inquiries and reviewing policies, processes, and developing issues and practices in the area of professional discipline. The committee also periodically reviews and recommends updates to the PIBC code. The types of complaints that we get are a wide variety. While most are quite unique, in broad terms, over the past decade, they fall into 4 categories. Half of the complaints have related to the general handling of a planning process or development approval process. About 4 of them, or about 17%, related to the lack of integrity, professionalism, collegiality, and undertaking planning services with diligence and appropriate preparation. 2 have been, or 8% have been related to the fair and accurate communications of skills offered and only doing work within areas of competence. And 8%, or 2 complaints, have related to the handling or signing off of a planning document or drawings. Of these 24 cases between 2012 and 2024, which is a bit more than a decade that I keep saying, actually, in 17, there was found to be no breach of code. 1 resulted in a full formal review hearing and consent discipline action, as it was a serious breach of code. Of the 12 cases over the past 3 years, a few are still being investigated. Many were found to be no breach of code, and 1 resulted in consent discipline. And I think this is where we're going to pause for questions. Is that correct, Sophie? Do we have time?
Yes. Thank you, Jacqueline, James, and Alex. We do have some time for questions, and I will change the screen format. James, I don't know if you're able to turn your camera on again. Would you like to try? But please turn on your microphone. And I know Alex has probably left us already to go to his other meeting. So let's see if James is able to turn on his camera.
I'm trying, but I can certainly hear and communicate. So please proceed.
Okay, you continue to try. I'm hoping everyone can see the submitted questions in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. I'm just going to pick a few. I'll pick one to start off with that I think is a key one. How do you balance the needs and wants of the people without compromising on the original goals of the project or the needs or wants of others? So who would like to answer that one?
I'm just flipping to some notes. Oh, Kev? Well, it kind of relates to a comment I was, and I'm happy, James, you'll jump in, but this, the idea of balancing needs and wants of people, this is back to that issue of understanding what the public interest means. So being able to express and balance the interests is an absolute fundamental skill needed by the planner. And it is trying to come to terms with the public interest. There is public interest built into the goals of the project, usually, because they've been generated from mandates that are coming from council or different clients. So there's interest there that are part of the public interest. And then, of course, the people in the community or other groups of residents or businesses, they also are part of the public interest. So it is that challenge of coming to terms with all of that and trying to work within the realm of public interest. So that's the best I could think about that balance. It's never easy in my experience, and always a challenge. And it kind of it's what really makes your work so valuable. And James, do you want to step in on that one at all? More questions might come up too.
Yeah, I completely agree, Jacqueline. The only thing I would add perhaps is, every case is unique, right? And it's not simple, and that's why they need us, right? And that's what adds value to the work that you do, is navigating these tricky situations. But I'll also add, in my experience, sometimes consensus is not possible, and it's about trade-offs. So consensus means that everybody is kind of on board, but sometimes there's trade-offs. And as Jacqueline mentioned, you go back to kind of the scope of the work that you were given and the objectives that you're trying to achieve. And it's often a balance between the trade-offs that are thrown at you. but again, that's what makes our work exciting, because we have to navigate these different subject interests and interest of the community, and find the best path forward in the situation you find yourself in.
Great, thank you both. These next two questions are somewhat related. What is the best practice if you disagree with your superior, be it a senior planner or GM, CAO, mayor or council, on what you believe is a critical question of planning judgment? And then the other question is how to approach handling ethics and professionalism with non-planners who are supervisors. For example, your recommendation is changed.
Maybe I'll start us off, Jackie, and you can jump in.
Please. Yes.
Yeah, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and I've told people this for years, that planners have a responsibility for your work. It's your opinion, and but not everybody's going to agree with that. And we all have our masters, and we have our employers and decision makers. Often, if you're in a municipal context, you're at the mercy of a council that's a decision making body. You're not. So you do the best you can to advance your opinion and back it up with your reasoning. And often you end up in situations where you have a superior or somebody that's signing off on your work that doesn't agree. But that's important to have a positive enough relationship that you can have those conversations around why you feel your recommendation is valid and the reasons for it. At the end of the day, you have to recognize the decision-making matrix you find yourself in and respect that process. But don't be afraid, if you really feel uncomfortable and your name's associated with something, to ask that your name be withdrawn from it. And Alex touched on this early in the presentation, is you have a responsibility for the work if your name's associated with it. And you need to take that seriously. If you do not agree, or you're fundamentally on a different perspective of the work that's being advanced, you need to find a way to have that conversation with your superiors, your manager, or whomever, to have your name removed from that work, because you will be associated with that opinion going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I completely agree, James. And funny, maybe for all of us who have been around this for a few decades, this is very, very near and dear to my heart as well. It has changed my careers, this issue, it's probably once or twice. And one of my pieces of advice, I agree with James, you have to think, it's always an option to do you still do your job and your work, and discuss, of course, and be open, but share the code of ethics that you must abide by, and try to request that your supervisor sign the recommendation that's in conflict. So that's sort of a very pragmatic solution that you carefully could maneuver to put the ownership of that decision that is you feel is contrary to the code. But I must say, one thing, one of the biggest lessons I've learned through my career is that it's really in a planner's best interest, really important, to reflect on your own values, so you know them to be true to you, for sure, but also to recognize your bias, and that the right answer in planning can take there's some nuances to that, and it can take different forms at times. So each of us brings our value judgments to work, and often we work for organizations that have identified their own values. I mean, you want to avoid organizations whose values you don't agree with, and when if they're too bizarre, and when it's it's a conflict that you have to face in choosing employment that does fit. So that's a tricky one, and a really important ethical question that I think we all come up against. Thank you for that question, whoever posed it.
Great, thank you very much. Is there an ethical limit to allowing personal knowledge to influence professional reports? And they give an example. If you had friends that complained about not being able to get into a daycare and then receive an application for a daycare, is it wrong to personally inform your friends once a council report is published and encourage them to write letters of support to council?
Well, I can start, but go ahead. You can wrap this one up, James. Public knowledge is, of course, always shareable, even personally. But so that sharing of information is fine, and when you step over the line, sometimes, for example, if you were to be encouraging people to write to council one way or another on a matter of which one is involved as a planner and also as a professional stakeholder, the insider in the story, that could be a transgression when the planner's bias is revealed and employed in that kind of subversive manner. So openly sharing public information without judgment that respects the employer and any direction received from the employer is part of our job. And it's what I'm thinking. James, you have another take on that one?
No, I completely agree. Maybe just a slightly different angle coming at it. I think your personal knowledge and experience will grow as you mature as a planner, and so you should draw on your personal knowledge about what the needs are in the community and what you know. But a big thing that we all have to keep in mind is it's not just like an obvious transgression; it's the appearance of it that can damage your reputation and the reputation of the profession as well. So it's there's a nuance that it's the appearance of inappropriate or ethical issues that can also cause that kind of reputational damage you need to be aware of, even if it was intentionally innocent about encouraging people to get involved. If it appears that you're trying to manipulate a process because of your involvement, you need to take you need to take that seriously and try and avoid those situations.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question on the reporting process: how to balance working with a PIBC member who may be engaging in unethical or perceived unethical behavior, and when to report. There's also a comment on the need for more anonymous reporting to be able to maintain working relationships. And I just want to go over to the chat window. Related to it, Mark Holland, in reality, he says almost no one will make a complaint against the planner because we all have to work together forever. So true. Any comments on that?
Yeah, maybe I could start us off. I understand the exposure that you find yourself in if you are the complainant, because you have to be involved. It's like not quite to the same degree, but it's like going to court and you have to plead your case, and it can certainly damage relationships forever. But there's a line there, and Jacqueline touched on this in the latter part of the presentation around the process and what the Professional Conduct Review Committee does and how serious that is. But I think it's always a good idea to talk to the people that you're not convinced or behaving ethically. And Jacqueline touched on this too. Like, talk to them. Like, it may be a perspective that you're not aware of, or you may not have all the information, or you might be making an assumption about bias. If you feel comfortable enough, please, approach the other individual as a fellow planner, as a fellow professional, and just say, I want to understand this better, and approach it from a knowledge acquiring perspective rather than an accusational. Because as we all know, if you come out swinging, people will get defensive, and you can damage the relationship or make it very uncomfortable. But I encourage you to take those softer approaches rather than the hard one, because it could be embarrassing for you too if you are missing some key piece of information, or you didn't really understand where the person was coming from or why, and you came on overly strong.
Yeah, without belaboring it, I think one of the I just finished a huge piece of research, and I think at the end I end up really focusing on us on our group as planners, and we somehow need to learn to become relational with each other rather than this transactional piece that's been going on. Because I acknowledge it's difficult to go and lodge a complaint against your your peer. But these conversations also need to be had. We're in a challenging time, and it seems that, anxieties are up, especially these days in between public and private sector, and the pressures that everyone's facing. So I think we're going to have to really change our culture, to try to deal with this better. But until the professional code of conduct is there for complaints to be dealt with, and although the two parties will know each other's names, it is a confidential process beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And Sophie, can I add really quickly? You touched on something that's really a big issue, Jacqueline. I think the way we communicate in general is changing, and changing really fast. Nobody phones anymore; it's all email. We don't have the same personal interaction we used to. The remote work, people seem to be avoiding personal contact more so than ever, and social media is running rampant. And I just caution every planner I have the chance to talk to about what you put in writing, because it's a permanent record. And email between friends or texting between friends is seen as very casual, but you should not treat communications with another professional or through your professional capacity in the same way, because they're permanent records that you're creating that could be distributed anywhere forever. So there's a caution there, I think we all should note.
Okay. So the next group of questions relate to the confidentiality of reporting, particularly in the event of sexual harassment. Some viewers are asking, what guidance do you have for young planners, especially female and BIPOC planners who may be in a bad situation?
So, yeah, and this one is, the right to work without sexual harassment is a matter of discrimination, black and white. and there's nothing gray about that. And it is set in the Human Rights Code. It's a matter, it can be the question sort of related to, okay, you can go through your employment. So yeah, it can be part of your respectful workplace policy and in particular organization you work with, so that that can be a fallback, but or it could fall under employment law. But there's more specific opportunities available, like in BC Human Rights Tribunal, to really, that's where those complaints are very serious and need to be lodged in the most effective place. So if the perpetrator, though, is a PIBC member, a complaint could be submitted to the related to professional conduct, for sure, 14.3. But the code is just simply less equipped than other avenues to address these very extreme human rights and possibly sometimes criminal matters like sexual harassment. So PIBC, we're really working to try to improve the code and provide some better direction on these kinds of issues and concerns. So if you're a member and witness a breach of the code by another member, you really have a duty to report that. And of course, we recommend, as we've been talking about, to try to have conversations first. But this one's serious and would be taken seriously by the folks that you deal with at PIBC. Anything else on that, James? This is like a big issue.
Oh, no, I have nothing to add. I think you covered it really well. This is very serious. And goes well beyond PIBC's jurisdiction, but you should never tolerate anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this next group of questions relates to the interaction, the clashing, I don't know what you want to call it, between public sector planners and private sector planners. The developer's planner working with the municipal planner. Could either of you provide some insight on what to do if there seems to be, there's a lot of examples there in front of us. How can each of the planners handle it if there's so much frustration and,
I have a few notes on that, so you can jump in while I collect my different notes. I was surprised at the breadth of this I don't know why I should be, but I was. I was surprised at the breadth of this issue, and I'm trying to imagine if it's the times we're working in right now. Go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
I'll just start off really quickly and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jacqueline. But I think it's inevitable that there's going to be conflicts because our profession tends to be more opinion based rather than mathematical, like say engineering. But I think our conflicts are getting more aggressive now than they have in the past. But it's so important to remember we're all just doing a job, and we're doing the best we can with the direction we have, the tools we have. I think it's inevitable you're headed towards conflict, but as a professional, we need to do that in a respectful way and try and find compromise wherever we can. Because at the end of the day, and what I find in my work is we're often trying to achieve the same objectives, right? And you're just coming at it from different ways. So if you can find that common ground, and I said earlier that you may not always be able to find consensus, but if you can find compromise or trade-offs or find areas that you can agree, that gives you that kind of head start to work on those other bits. But recognizing we all just have to get this work done and move on. Sometimes it's not pleasant, but more often than not, in my experience, it's been a good experience because you have a positive outcome that you can both share.
Yeah, and I think I was probably, when I was reading some of the early questions, they got quite specific. And what's interesting when you read a list of them where there's private sector planners sort of concerned, like having issues with public sector and vice versa, it begs the question as to whether or not each other really appreciates the other's professional obligations, which are in the code to their employer and to the public. And both sectors have those obligations. So there was comments, for example, related to amenities were a big deal. But in one of the cases, it's still the city policy that they can be applied to a certain point, and there can be direction from council to a public council via the CAO to a public sector planner to do these things. I mean, there's changes coming, but that's can still be part of their obligation in their role. Talking about trying to push consultation when the intent of legislation is trying to hurry things along. Well, there's nothing there's not a rule that a planner can't go beyond provincial requirements or that it's unethical. That's not true. And the planner is going to only do that in a public sector under the direction of their CAO, which is, of course, overseen by councils. So the planners have that role. They have to achieve that role. And absolutely, the private sector is going to interpret some of these new directions in a different way. I think the other one was about how we talk about reports, and it's about every single human being is bringing their own personal bias and value judgments to their practices, regardless. None of us could be objective. Zoning, we are actually working with systems that were built to be biased and judge, to be honest. So we're in tricky territory. So regardless of which sector we're in, this is the case. So it's that relationality and trying to start hearing each other and understanding the very different mandates that two different planners can be working within and have professional obligations to achieve based on the code. That's kind of this. I think I had more. I was on a kick about this, but those were some of the things I noticed.
Thank you. How can or even should individual PIBC RPP members respond to continued online professional criticism that we are beholden to developers or in their pockets when the criticism is placed with zero evidence?
Yeah, this is almost relates in a way again, but PBC does have that. It's a comprehensive complaint and discipline process. So with information on the PIBC website, and people can submit that formal written complaint, and it will be investigated along with any evidence that's submitted. And in the case of the online interactions that go on, sometimes that evidence is quite evident. So the online comments, while you can also take the path that they're really to be taken with a grain of salt, criticism out there can affect, individual planners' professional reputation. And so, yeah, they just check the website, and the complaints discipline section of the PIB website, and just think about how you might want to document that and have it dealt with.
And maybe to take a slightly different angle on this, planners are often criticized by non-planners for, bias or being in the pocket of somebody or unethical behavior, and it's challenging. And you have to have thick skin to be a planner and try and move past this criticism. And I know it's hard, and the criticism is more rampant now than ever. And the avenues that people have to publicly criticize you and your work are, more prevalent than ever. But if you are working in a public setting, for example, I wouldn't be shy about letting your managers or CAO know that these criticisms are happening. Many organizations have anti-bullying and anti-harassment policies, similar to the anti-sexual harassment piece we talked about a few minutes ago. This should be taken seriously, because sometimes they cross the line into harassment, and it can affect your mental health and can affect your career and your relationships, and you shouldn't take it. But there are avenues to explore, and look for those allies and those opportunities to put a stop to it. It's really hard for non-planners to appreciate that we are often in a very public setting with people throwing darts at us, and there's nothing we can do about it because we aren't allowed to defend ourselves, or we rely on others to defend us on our behalf. And I've seen that for years and throughout my career, and it can be draining, and it's hard on your mental health. And I just know that you have other professionals that sympathize, and look for those allies and talk it out. And that's the best you can do. But also there's other avenues, human rights and policies that you could fall back on that could provide support if it's becoming abusive.
Thank you. Going on to the questions in the chat window now. Could you expand on the clause that was about not doing work for more than one agency or project within the same jurisdiction? Can you give an example? As a planning consultant, can I not work on several plans within the same municipality at the same time? And I think this was during the time you were speaking, James, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think the genesis of that, it's not necessarily saying that you shouldn't have multiple clients in the same municipality. It's more where they start to, there's a potential that they could start to butt up against each other in terms of trade-offs that you are advocating for on one property versus another. And again, there's an appearance thing there, especially when it comes into financial issues around infrastructure and different things like that you should be conscious of. I think that's kind of the genesis of that caution.
And the most extreme example, which is probably never going to happen, but is a consulting planner that might take on writing the OCP or zoning bylaw for a municipality, and also take on a contract with a developer who's trying to develop in that municipality. I mean, that one's pretty pretty obvious. Some of the less clear ones, like a less clear one that I may have experienced in my career, is if all of a sudden, as a consultant, I'm plugged into, as the planner, I'm plugged into, I recall being plugged into like 3 different infrastructure projects, which a bunch of, different companies were working for each of these infrastructure projects. They were all working for the city, but you could argue, oh, well, am I in conflict because I'm working for all of these 3 or 4 different agencies who are each working on a separate infrastructure project that are intersecting with each other. The whole point of the work was to be that. So the key would be to be very transparent, to have those agreements with each agency and the overall client just very transparent and understood, so the role's clear, I think.
Yeah, and maybe just quickly an additional piece that I've seen that very thing. If you're working for a firm that does a lot of work in an area, there's nothing wrong with excusing yourself from a project where it starts to butt up against a conflict. But it doesn't mean your firm has to give up on that project. It's just, I recognize it's starting to butt up against this other work, and I'm going to step back as a professional and just not be involved. And I guarantee you'll get a lot of respect from your colleagues and the municipality for making that obvious, and it also keeps you from that perception piece again of maybe not being as transparent as you should be.
Thank you. Is translation in other languages beyond English and French considered a responsibility or best practice?
Yeah, maybe
I
I'll
guess that
start.
would depend on the situation, right?
Yeah, I could start us off. I think it's neither. I think it's recognizing that communities are changing. And I think it's a really good thing for us to recognize where the systems exclude certain people. And this is something that we're continuing to learn and get better at. But as planners, we're front and center with public engagement. And we are in the best position to try and tackle this issue. And I was very careful to mention, where opportunities and resources permit as I was presenting, because sometimes it's just overly restrictive or costly to try and translate into every language that might have a home in your community. But recognizing where those communities may be excluded because of language barriers or communication barriers, it's no different than conversations we've been having for years about people relying on newspapers versus mail outs for notice versus online. Not everybody has the same access or resources to participate, and just being aware of that and looking for those opportunities where you can break down those barriers will make you a better professional and help protect that public interest in a stronger way.
Mm-hmm. Jacqueline, anything to add?
No, I thought that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you please share some examples of when a planner may inappropriately do work outside of their area of expertise? Planning covers many topics, so curious to hear about what the boundaries exist from a professional ethics perspective. It's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Maybe just to jump in real quick. And I think you're going to come across these situations in a casual way, probably not overly serious, because I think those ones tend to be more obvious, like you giving advice on how to build a bridge and you have no expertise in that area. But there are subtle opportunities that can start to butt up against this, like the challenge is, as you become more and more experienced in, say, things like landscape design, you might have an opinion on the species of trees that are on a landscape plan. I don't think that's inappropriate. You're not a landscape architect, but passing yourself off, or an arborist necessarily, but passing yourself off as an expert in that area and giving expert advice on some engineering plan or mischaracterizing your expertise, that's where it becomes an ethical issue. But I don't think there's anything wrong as a professional planner to share your opinion on how this grading plan may cause problems, because in your experience, this has caused problems in the past and you're speaking up, but recognizing that if you want somebody to redesign a grading plan, that's where you can seek that advice. And as we've all seen, you are given advice and guidance and technical information from different sources, and you have to sort through it. So there's a certain amount of expertise you have to employ to understand what's being communicated to you, and those intersections with other pieces of information you're trying to manage. But it's when you start passing yourself off as an expert and making adjustments to that professional advice, it gets into that ethical quagmire.
I've just had two interesting examples that I think kind of got me thinking about this issue. And one, they were both public complaints and both against members. And but one was trying to suggest that the planner was somehow misrepresenting a very, very technical engineering issue, geotechnical engineering issue. And the other one was trying to suggest that the planner was mixed up in some very sophisticated financial economic analysis that was, and both of the complaints were trying to go down this path about the planner working outside their professional purview and related to the code. Like, obviously the real issues were something else, but this came up in both cases. And in this case, both planners did their job very diligently. One, they were clear about their role in the process. That was the planning role. So they may have, you end up working with financial folks or economists, or you end up, we're obviously working with engineers, including geotechnical. And it's just when you're doing that, as these planners were, to be very clear of your role as a planner, and not to ever suggest that your role relates to the decision of how to apply a geotechnical analysis to some particular physicality of land, or that your expertise relates to how to produce a huge financial analysis that is beyond the kind of financial analysis that a planner would do, I guess. I don't know. That's a couple that I've seen.
Great, thank you. This question came up when you were speaking, Jacqueline, I believe. Are the consent agreements published with facts and penalties? This was during the complaints section.
Yeah, I read that question. I was looking at the question going, oh, is somebody on here? I'm new to the committee, only a year and a half now. We do publish some summaries. I don't know if they're published yet, but we talk about it at the committee. Is anyone from our committee on here that could just confirm if they are?
I'm also new to the committee, Jacqueline, but I know that we do publish names, and that's part of the discipline. If it turns out that that's part of the that it's the decision is that discipline is warranted. Names are published in Planning West, and discipline, a notice of discipline that they've been stripped of their RPP designation will be published. But not any of the details of who complained and what the situation was and why this discipline was imposed. There's a lot of confidential information that's withheld, but certainly the names are very publicly displayed as a result. But it is rare, but it can be part of the consent discipline process.
Okay. Wow. One of our participants has encountered the situation where people throw darts at you as a planner in Alberta and Ontario. Okay.
I think they're metaphorical darts, I think.
I hope so.
Oh, I don't know. I knew a planner who had to wear a bulletproof vest to a public hearing. That was many years ago. But anyways, different place, not here.
Yeah.
Okay. What should the responsibility be of of planning and the planning profession generally be to take the initiative to fix profoundly dysfunctional zoning bylaws, out-of-date policies, and plans. All other professions lead the development and updating of their core standards, practices, etc., outside their places of work, but it seems our profession rarely feels responsible for having current policies and procedures.
Of course, this is from Mark. Okay, I have to go. This is like my favorite issue. It is so interesting because we do hold ourselves in, some with against our code and believe in the public good and all of these things. And our day-to-day work is working with zoning bylaws, a lot of us, which are some of the most systemically embedded colonial tools that were installed 100 years ago to exclude, to desegregate, to do all of these things that we that we believe that we're not here to do. So to every day have to continue to work with these tools is hugely problematic. And how do we keep doing that? And what's our responsibility to change them is the question. And I don't have a great answer, except that we have to culturally change who we are. And hopefully we can help along with other people who help people understand by being more transparent with the information that are in those, especially zoning bylaws, so that more and more diverse voices and minds can have access and be also voices to talk about this, because our voices are not diverse enough, to be honest, to really fully understand the full implications of that relationship with land that is completely embedded in zoning bylaw regulations. So I don't have a great answer to, what are we going to do about that? But I sure think each one of us has a role. And I hope that over the years, we can understand better through some of our decolonization efforts that the PIBC are working on, and to start making those, revealing those, understanding, acknowledging the truth about where those came from and what's in those zoning bylaws, and then a responsibility toward reconciling what's in them.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that was a bit. I just opened a real kind of worms there. Sorry, but it's true.
Great, James. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just quickly.
I heard you chuckling earlier.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what's being said, and I've had many scars from this kind of thing too. But as I noted earlier, that we're not decision makers, we're advisors. So sometimes taking on a zoning bylaw update is not on a work plan for a council or a board. These things can be costly. They can take a lot of resources. Absolutely, we have an obligation to bring these issues up, because if we don't, who will? And to Jacqueline's point, we do have an obligation to look at those kind of broken pieces of our governing legislation and try and make things better. But sometimes you just have to look for those opportunities to get small wins and move in the right direction. Sometimes you can't just say everything has to stop because we have to completely rebuild this project and it's going to take 5 years. Sometimes it's just, most of the time it's not real, but you just have to look for those opportunities to make things better incrementally. Excuse me.
I would challenge each planner to figure out what they're going to do about it. For me, what I did about it is it bothers me terribly and fundamentally. And so I decided I needed to go spend a few years and research the truth about it, so that I was not just speaking with an opinion, but with the facts about how these got established and how they relate to our planning world. And so, I that's what I did. I mean, it cost me a lot of money and time, but I'm happy if anyone wants to, play around in that field in their spare time with me. I think we have lots of work to do, and there's nothing wrong with us giving back to this kind of cause outside of our employment.
Okay, great. Catherine says that yes, we do publish summaries for consent discipline. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
And a couple of people have noted, Kelty and Joseph have noted some good resources there. I want to point out that we have had some planners from the City of Edmonton present our regular webinar during our regular webinar program on equity and how they're changing their zoning bylaws. So yes, that's a very good initiative there. I think we're slowly out of time, and I think I will end it there. I'm going to go to our final slide. Again, well, let me start by thanking our speakers again. Wonderful, wonderful information, lots of things to think about. Thank you, Jacqueline, James, and Alex Taylor. I know you're not there right now, for your presentations and the time, spending the time today, with us. I wanted to let people know that the recording and the presentation materials will become available shortly on our website. So if you want to review the presentation or look at the presentation material more closely, please go to our website shortly. And also for everybody watching today, remember to claim 1.5 units of organized structured CPL units. Jacqueline and James, you are able to claim 3 units for presenting today. Yeah. And I will leave you with summary of upcoming PIBC events. January 31st, 2025, we have our annual planning outlook. This is a very popular webinar, and we have professionals from the housing industry and the industrial industry providing updates. We also have Lisa Helps from BC Builds this time presenting an update on the BC Builds project. In March, we will be looking at AI applications in planning. And again, at the end, probably in June, we will look at more of the ethical issues surrounding AI applications in planning. So the one in March is learning about how to use AI in your planning context. And then, of course, June 10th to 13th, we have the 2025 PIBC annual conference, next chapter, taking place at the Wall Center in Vancouver, BC this year. First time ever we've had just a PIBC annual conference in Vancouver. A lot of good planning going on. I know volunteers are working very hard. We will be coming out with an extra early bird registration before we break for the holidays. If you are going to attend or planning on attending the conference, no matter what, this is where you will be able to receive the best possible registration price. So if you're planning on attending the conference, again, no matter what the program, you should register for the extra early registration. What else do I have? One more thing. Ray from our office asked me to let you know that as part of PIBC's professional governance, research, and engagement project, we are inviting the membership to visit the PIBC website to learn more about the integrated research and to complete the engagement survey that we sent out today, I believe, via the e-news special. We want to provide offer engagement and provide valuable perspectives and feedback on the planning profession and the Provincial Governance Act. And I know there were some questions that came up regarding this. So make sure you have your voice heard and fill out the survey. And there will be more free webinars on this issue and more resources and information from PIBC coming out. Again, thank you to all our speakers today.